Before the world was shaped, before the rising of the sun and moon, before even the first elves walked beneath the stars, there were the eagles. No, not just any eagles. These were no ordinary birds. They were the messengers of the gods, the eyes of the heavens, the silent watchers from on high. They were creatures of divine will, and more importantly, they were absolutely not Middle-earth's taxi service. The great eagles were not beasts of burden, nor were they servants of elves, men, or even wizards. They answered only to one. Manwë, King of the Valor, Lord of the Winds, Middle-earth's original cloud-watching deity.
That also shall come to be by the heed of Ilúvatar. And before the children awake, there shall go forth with wings like the wind, the eagles of the lords of the west.
That's right. Manwë, the celestial weather god, created the eagles to act as his divine surveillance system. And they weren't just big birds with attitude. They were semi-divine beings, with their own will, their own purpose, and their own refusal to be used for pointless mortal errands.
Thorondor came hasting from his eyrie among the peaks of the Chrysogrim, and he stooped upon Morgoth and marred his face.
Let's just take a moment to appreciate that one of the first things the eagles did was attack Morgoth himself, a being so powerful that he made Sauron look like an edgy teenager in comparison. They were not pets, not mere animals, but the ultimate sky warriors of Middle-earth. Yet, despite their godly status, despite their power and wisdom, the great eagles never ruled, never took dominion, never sought to impose their will on the world below. They watched, they waited, and they acted only when they deemed it necessary. Even Gandalf, Middle-earth's ultimate "I have friends in high places" guy, had to ask nicely when he needed help. No commands, no demands, just favors. The eagles were not servants, not soldiers, and certainly not at the beck and call of every desperate adventurer.
"Twice you have borne me, Gwaihir, my friend,"
said Gandalf.
"Thrice shall pay for all if you are willing. You will not find me a burden much greater than when you bore me from Ziraxigil, where my old life burned away."
"I would bear you,"
answered Gwaihir.
"whither you will, even were you made of stone."
So why didn't they just fly the ring to Mount Doom? Because they didn't have to. Because they weren't Middle-earth's Uber. Because they weren't stupid. Alright, let's talk about the absolute worst tactical plan in Middle-earth history. Just fly the ring to Mount Doom. Because apparently, the best way to sneak into enemy territory is by loudly soaring through the sky on a giant bird. Yeah, that would have gone great. Mordor wasn't just some open plain where you could casually drop in, do a little sightseeing, and chuck the ring into a volcano. It was one of the most fortified locations in Middle-earth.
No sign of any enemy had they seen. No cry or call had been heard. No shaft had sped from rock or thicket by the way. Yet ever as they went forward, they felt the watchfulness of the land increase.
Sauron wasn't some incompetent final boss who left his weak spot exposed. He had spies, soldiers, and an all-seeing magical eye actively scanning for threats. The second the eagles entered Mordor, it would have been game over. Oh, and in case you're still thinking, well, Frodo and Sam sneaked in just fine, so why not the eagles? Let's talk about why they weren't immediately caught.
Along all the roads, troops were moving, for the captains of the west were advancing, and the Dark Lord was speeding his forces north.
Sauron was so convinced that Aragorn had the ring, he emptied Mordor's army to fight at the Black Gate. This meant he had fewer orcs around to do guard duty.
No, indeed,
said Gollum.
Hobbits must see, must try to understand. He does not expect attack that way. His eye is all round, but it attends more to some places than to others.
And then there's Shelob. You know, the horrifying immortal demon spider who was basically Mordor's final security checkpoint. Sauron didn't even bother guarding that pass because he figured no one was dumb enough to try it. And if they did, they'd end up as second breakfast. So, let's recap. The only reason Frodo and Sam got into Mordor was because Sauron was busy elsewhere and because their route was considered instant death. Now, remind me, how exactly were giant eagles going to be stealthier than two hobbits crawling through a spider cave? The Nazgul weren't just creepy guys in cloaks. They were Sauron's personal air force, flying on monstrous fell beasts whose entire purpose was to dominate the skies.
The shadow of horror wheeled and returned, passing lower now, right above them, sweeping the Fenreek with its ghastly wings. And then it was gone, flying back to Mordor with the speed of the wrath of Sauron.
Let's do the math. Eagles, big targets. Nazgul, faster, vicious, and armed with dark magic. This isn't an airdrop mission, it's a flying meat grinder. Oh, and let's not forget the actual wild card in all this, the One Ring itself.
Certainly the ring had grown greatly in power as it approached the places of its forging.
The closer the ring got to Sauron, the stronger its influence became. You really think Frodo would have resisted it while flying directly into Sauron's lap? Yeah, no, the Eagles aren't taxi drivers. If Frodo went full ring wraith mid-flight, they'd just yeet him off like a cursed object and keep flying. Congratulations, you played yourself. And finally, the Eagles themselves? Not interested.
I was sent to bear tidings, not burdens.
Even when they did help, it was on their terms. They weren't Middle-earth's Uber, and Gwaihir wasn't about to risk his entire species on a plan that had a 99.9% failure rate. So, to recap, the Eagles couldn't fly in unnoticed. They'd get absolutely wrecked by the Nazgul. The ring would betray the entire mission, and the Eagles themselves weren't stupid enough to try it. Let's not forget that even in The Hobbit, the Eagles weren't exactly running a full-service airline. They helped? Sure, but only on their terms. And those terms did not include full rides to your destination. In case you missed it, Thorin and company got saved from burning to death, only to get dumped on a random mountain far from their actual destination. Did the Eagles fly them to Erebor? Nope. Did they even ask? Yes. And what did the Eagles say?
The Lord of the Eagles would not take them anywhere near where men lived.
No, we are glad to cheat the goblins of their sport, and glad to repay our thanks to you. But we will not risk ourselves for dwarves in the southward plains.
That's right. No full ride, no VIP seating, not even a connecting flight. The Eagles just yeeted them onto a hilltop and basically said, "You're on your own, guys." So let's do the math here. The Eagles refused to carry Thorin and his company to a giant pile of gold guarded by a single dragon, but they were somehow going to carry Frodo straight into Sauron's backyard, past the Nazgul, the Eye of Sauron, and every single defense Mordor had? Yeah, that wasn't happening. All right, so you've probably heard this one before. Why didn't the Eagles just fix everything? But here's the thing. They did help. Just not in the way people wanted. Because what did people want? A giant bird taxi service. What did they get? A highly specialized airstrike. So, let's talk about the Battle of the Five Armies. You've got elves, men, and dwarves already fighting each other when suddenly, surprise, orcs show up to crash the party. It's all going downhill fast. Enter the Eagles.
The Eagles were coming down the wind, line after line, in such a host as must have gathered from all the Aeries of the north.
The Eagles weren't the main event. They were the high-impact cavalry strike. They didn't show up to carry everyone to safety. They showed up to rip through the orc ranks and save the day. Let's get one thing straight. The Eagles are not soldiers. They are not part of anybody's army. They don't follow orders. They don't do logistics. They are divine beings who show up when it makes sense for them to intervene.
Most have gone back to their Aeries. They would not stay here and departed with the first light of morning.
Tolkien knew they weren't logistically viable for a full battle campaign. They came in at the right time, did what was necessary, and left. If you wanted an army of domesticated warbirds, you should have trained them yourselves. You don't yell at firefighters for not fixing your plumbing. You don't expect paramedics to pave roads. The Eagles? They're Middle-earth's emergency response team. They get in, they deal with the problem, they leave. No follow-up survey. The only reason people expect more from them is because they look cool. Nobody asks why Bjorn didn't stay and start a bear-led revolution, or why Galadriel didn't show up and go full Eldritch mode. But the second a giant bird shows up, suddenly it should have solved everything. In conclusion, the Eagles did help. They saved the day at the Battle of the Five Armies, they rescued Gandalf multiple times, they obliterated orcs on sight, and they got Frodo and Sam out of Mordor when it was finally safe to do so. They were never meant to be Middle-earth's Uber. The one time the Eagles actually did what people wanted, flying into Mordor. They weren't on a suicide mission to drop off the ring, but rather to pull two crispy hobbits out of a volcanic wasteland.
Frodo and Sam could go no further. Their last strength of mind and body was swiftly ebbing. They had reached a low ashen hill piled at the mountain's foot, But from it, there was no more escape. It was an island now, not long to endure, amid the torment of Orodruin.
With the ring gone and Sauron vaporized into regret, the last threat was dehydration, lava, and the slow process of becoming Hobbit jerky. Simple. Mordor's entire defense system collapsed the moment the ring went bye-bye. Sauron's eye? Gone. The Nazgul? Barbecued. The orc armies? Fleeing faster than customers when a restaurant asks for online reviews.
The captains bowed their heads, and when they looked up again, behold, their enemies were flying and the power of Mordor was scattering like dust in the wind.
The Eagles weren't sneaking past Mordor's defenses. There were no defenses left. They just swooped in, grabbed the hobbits, and left before anyone could ask them to do more. To be fair, they did. They just didn't take them all the way home. They brought Frodo and Sam to Aragorn and Gandalf because, honestly, these two needed serious medical attention before even thinking about second breakfast.
Full memory flooded back, and Sam cried aloud.
It wasn't a dream, then where are we?
And a voice spoke softly behind him.
In the land of Ithilien, and in the keeping of the king, and he awaits you.
With that, Gandalf stood before him, robed in white, his beard now gleaming like pure snow in the twinkling of the leafy sunlight.
So yes, the Eagles could have flown them further, but let's be real. This was a rescue mission, not a Middle-earth tour package. So the one time the Eagles actually carried people exactly where they needed to go, it was because it was safe to do so. There were no enemies left, and frankly, Gandalf probably asked nicely this time. So, after all this, what have we learned? The Eagles are not a taxi service. They're Middle-earth's emergency response team. They don't take bookings, they don't do drop-offs, and they sure as heck don't care about your convenience. The Eagles did help. They showed up when it mattered, and they saved the day. But they were never going to be Middle-earth's frequent flyer program. The Eagles were not soldiers. They weren't a wizard's personal cavalry. They were free spirits with divine bird privileges. And frankly, they had better things to do. And the one time they actually gave someone a full ride, it was because the war was already over, and Mordor had turned into a volcanic tourist trap. No more defenses, no more risks. Just two hobbits who needed a lift out of the world's worst spa treatment. So, next time someone says, "Why didn't the Eagles just fly to Mount Doom?" Remember, that's like asking why an ambulance didn't take you on a cross-country road trip. It was never the plan. It was never their job. And frankly, they're probably still annoyed we even asked. So now that we've finally settled the Great Eagle debate, what do you think? Should Middle-earth travelers file an official complaint with Gwaihir? Or is it time to let it go? Let us know in the comments. Bonus points if you rate Eagle Airlines out of 5 stars. And if you love overthinking fantasy logistics, we've got you covered. Every Friday, we drop a deep dive into your favorite fantasy lore's biggest mysteries. And on Wednesdays, we throw in a bonus video. Because let's be honest, we can't stop spiraling about this stuff. So subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next one. Probably arguing about another fantasy debate that no one asked for, but we're giving you anyway.